Forget Rome, forget Egypt. This civilization was bigger, older, and built perfect, grid-style cities. But when we found them, there was one terrifying problem. They had no kings, no armies, no palaces. It was a giant, high-tech society that didn't believe in war. And then, they vanished. What happened to the 5 million people who ran the world's first utopia? The answer isn't in their walls, it's in their drains. This is the real history of Harappa, and the 3 clues to its secret death. Welcome back, fellow history enthusiasts. You're watching Legendary Anime Tales, where we bring the history to life with a unique anime twist. The Indus Valley Civilization, or Harappa, should be history's poster child. They emerged around 3300 BCE, making them contemporaries of the Great Pyramids and the first Sumerian kings. But geographically, they dwarfed them all. Across nearly 1.5 million square kilometers, they built over 1,000 settlements. Their major cities, like Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, were home to tens of thousands. So why did they get barely a chapter in the history books? Because Harappa did everything backwards. When every other civilization was spending its tax money on towering statues, divine right, and armies, Harappa was obsessed with infrastructure. They didn't build colossal temples or palaces. They didn't engrave their victories onto monuments. In fact, the most impressive thing they built was their plumbing. Almost every house in Mohenjo-daro had its own bathroom, connected to a sophisticated city-wide drainage network. They were quite literally centuries ahead of Rome. We're talking ancient times. And these guys had better sewer systems than modern Paris. This tells us something critical about their society. They valued the collective good over individual power. But a society without visible rulers creates the biggest mystery of all. Who was actually in charge? We'll tackle that power structure next. Now for the real Harappan flex, standardization. For centuries, across thousands of miles, Harappan builders used bricks of the exact same proportions. They used weights and measures that were so precise and uniform, it suggests a centralized, meticulous governing body. Think about that. They had no bureaucracy, no roads, and no centralized communication like a modern government. But somehow, every bricklayer was following the same 1:4 ratio. This level of control would make an anime villain blush. It proves a powerful, invisible force was at work. Historians call this corporate control, a vast economic machine run by merchants, not monarchs. The merchants were the true power. They were trading everything from copper to cotton. This explains why they invested in city planning and public goods. A clean, orderly city is good for business. And their second major anomaly, peace. In 700 years of civilization, we found zero evidence of large-scale warfare. No walls built for defense, few weapons, and no battle scars. In the ancient world, that's like a superhero opting to settle every conflict with a strongly worded email. The peace allowed them to focus on production. Remember that item they traded with Mesopotamia? Not weapons, not tribute. They were exporting cotton and importing dazzling prestige beads like lapis lazuli, a rich society spending its money on jewelry, not armies. They did have one intriguing statue, the famous priest king. He's not intimidating, he's contemplative. Was he a ruler, a shaman, or just a really well-dressed merchant? The answer is locked behind our next problem. The one that makes Harappa the ultimate ghost story. For all their incredible organization, the Harappans left us one impossible puzzle. Their writing is still undeciphered. We have thousands of samples of the Indus script, mostly on small seals and tokens. Unlike Egypt, we haven't found a Rosetta Stone, a single text translated into a known language. We can't tell if the script is a language at all, or just a list of economic symbols. The longest text we have is only about 26 symbols. That's not a declaration of war or a law code, that's barely a tweet. This massive lack of text means we have no names, no stories, and no perspective from the Harappans themselves. History is told by the victors, but this time the victors are silent. We can only infer their lives through their pots, their baths, and their remarkably consistent bricks. Their civilization is a beautiful, enormous vase. But the narrative is currently empty. The final act of the Harappan story is the most brutal. They reached their peak around 1900 BCE. And then, over the next few centuries, their world didn't explode, it dried up. This leads us to the 3 catastrophic theories of their sudden demise. The leading theory, and perhaps the cruelest, climate change. Harappa relied entirely on the massive Indus River system and the seasonal monsoons. When those monsoons began to shift and the Sarasvati River dried up, the highly centralized farming system failed. Imagine the perfect city, but the reservoirs are empty. People weren't slaughtered, they simply couldn't eat. This wasn't a sudden death but a slow, decades-long starvation. People packed up their families and simply walked away, searching for new water sources. For a long time, the dominant idea was the Aryan invasion theory. Nomadic Indo-European tribes, potentially linked to the Rig Veda, were thought to have swept through, destroying the cities and killing the inhabitants. This theory gave the collapse a great Hollywood villain, but historians have largely cut the fluff and rejected it. Yes, we found some skeletons scattered in Mohenjo-daro, suggesting sudden violence. But it wasn't a systematic military invasion, it was likely banditry and chaos during the widespread famine. The most accepted idea is internal migration and decentralization. The people didn't die out, they redispersed. The complex society of the great cities dissolved, and the population shifted south and east, integrating with existing cultures. The Harappan culture didn't vanish, it simply fragmented. The perfect city gave way to sustainable village life. The standardized bricks and grand baths were abandoned because the high-tech, centralized organization that built them was no longer possible in a desert environment. The mystery, then, isn't what destroyed Harappa, but how quietly a 5 million person society could decide to dissolve itself. Imagine the ultimate societal consensus. Well, this isn't working, let's go. What did this utopian, water-obsessed, war-hating society leave behind? A legacy of precision, complex social life, and possibly even the beginnings of modern Hinduism in figures like the Proto-Shiva. Perhaps the ultimate lesson of Harappa is that true power isn't found in gold or armies, but in a functional sewage system, and a community that values the life of every citizen. A civilization that put plumbing before palaces is the ultimate historical power move. But the script remains broken and the full story is still unwritten. Which theory do you find most convincing? Was it the slow death by drought, the quick death by bandit, or the quiet retreat into the villages? Let me know in the comments below. If you want to dive deeper into the world's most forgotten empires, hit subscribe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.